Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast show on the topic AI in healthcare. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Ms. Punitee Garyali. Punitee has been working a lot in the applications of AI in biomedical use cases. She had blended the power of AI with her biochemistry subject matter expertise, and she is currently working with AI Talos as a medical advisor. So today we are going to hear a lot of her experiences and advancements happening in the biomedical field. Welcome to this podcast show, Puniti.
Thank you, Deepak, for having me here.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions to you today, and starting with, so let's start with the tracking and early detection mechanism using AI technologies in the healthcare domain. So what are the current solutions available, and what is the maturity of it?
Talking about AI in healthcare, um, in the past years there has been a lot of progress when it comes to diagnosis and detection using AI in healthcare. So, let me give you a brief example so it's easier to understand. So, I'll take the work that we do at AI Talos. What we are trying to do is to use artificial intelligence to power the existing diagnostic modalities. So, essentially, at AI Talos, what we are doing is using thermographic images, which is heat images of the tissue. Now, is that new? No. The first thermography was, I think, in 1950s. That was the first time thermography was used. But what we are doing today is powering thermography with AI, which increases the accuracy and precision of the diagnostic modality. The first topic that you mentioned, which was keeping well and early detection, there are certain aspects of it. The first is what we can call pre screening, that you know that you're at a high risk for that particular disease. So you want to make sure that you're screened well for the disease. The second is monitoring of your risk. And the last part is early detection. Right now, the biggest challenge which the healthcare industry, which healthcare is facing, is an ever increasing burden on our healthcare systems. If we have learned anything in the last 2 years from the pandemic, we have realized that how easily our healthcare system can become overwhelmed. So how can we solve? And this is going to increase. It's not going to go down anyway. The only way we can help our healthcare system is using technology, using artificial intelligence to support our healthcare system in a way that it doesn't become overwhelmed. So, a simple example is if we are able to have more pre screening modalities using artificial intelligence, for example, in thermography, that means we will detect the cases really early on. If I'm talking about breast cancer, we detect breast cancer at a stage where we don't need a confirmation with a surgical biopsy, where once it's detected, the treatment is quick. The hospital beds are not occupied for a long time. There is no elaborate surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. So, this overall, it improves the patient outcomes, but at the same time, it also is reducing the burden on our healthcare system. So there is a lot which is happening right now across the globe, be it in cardiology, eye, cancer. We have lot of people who are working to either create something new or power the existing modalities, the diagnostic modalities with AI to help the patients and also the healthcare system.
Okay, got it. So over to the next point. So on diagnosis and decision making. So how good the AI can aid in these two steps, basically.
For diagnosis, I would say if a modality for example, had an accuracy of 70%. We are right now at a place where we can, with the help of AI, we can take that accuracy from 70% to 95%. So the key here is that if we are using, say for example, we are using a deep learning algorithm to power any a radiology or a pathology, anything which is a digital imaging. The key here is that with a deep learning algorithm, it's continuously learning. So every patient that it is diagnosing, that's a new data entry for the algorithm. So I can only say that with time, the accuracy and precision of the model is going to increase further. I hope that makes sense or you're able to understand where I'm going.
Correct, correct. Yeah.
So it's a lot. For example, if we are looking at eye in diabetes, like diabetes is known to affect the eye to the extent that the images which are formed in the retina of the eye, we so the retina is the key in the eye where the images are formed and we can actually see. So diabetes affects that, which is called the diabetic retinopathy. Now, if we have screening modalities in place, proper screening modalities in place, and I'm just talking about the United States, if everybody who needs a diabetic retinopathy screening done, I'm just looking at almost 30 million retinal images in 1 year that need to be screened. So there the picture comes in that if we train the AI to do it, they will do it with precision, with accuracy, and that's uniform. There's no subjective bias there. So I think that is a very important aspect that we have to understand is that the use of AI is going to make the life of patients better and also the life of physicians much easier.
Understood. So AI will be kind of enabling. So let's say we have like a lot of records, and physicians don't want to actually manually go through everything, but AI can actually give us a first step, and then as a validation step, maybe the physicians can actually by themselves look and confirm it.
Exactly. That is precisely the point which I was making, and you got it absolutely correct. That it's physician and AI walking hand in hand. And of course, there are parameters where subjective error can happen. Like after a long day, at the end of the day, if a radiologist is looking at a CT scan, he might miss something which is really small and tiny, and because human eyes can get tired, but AI won't get tired as easily as a human. So we have the reproducibility of the AI that every time it's the precision is going to be 95, the accuracy is going to be 97, and that is how it is developed, and it's every scan will get the same rate.
Okay, okay, got it. And my next point. So, could you talk a bit about how robotics is aiding in the treatment and end of the life care systems?
Sure. So robotics has been there for much longer than I mean, be it in a lab setting where they're helping in doing diagnosis, in a lab, in a pathology or in a microbiology lab. We also have robotics to aid and assist a human surgeon. And we are at a stage where we have some robots who can actually perform simple tasks without a human being there to assist. But mostly, what I'm talking about is robotics are more of a assistant, but time will tell where we actually reach a stage with robotics where they will be able to perform elaborate surgical procedures or not. But when it comes to end of life care, robotics play a big role there because essentially at that stage, Robotics can help the patient be independent because you're at a stage where you don't want to be dependent on anyone. You don't want to stay in a hospital just because you can't take care of yourself. So we can remove the hospitalization, the stay in the nursing home or care homes with the use of robotics. Now, in addition to that, there is also a role of robotics, and very recently, as helping the nurses at the nursing station. Say the linen cabinet is empty and that needs to be filled. That is a job that has to be done. And we are reaching a stage where we have robots who can actually do it. Like taking the sample from the nurses station, say, for example, to the microbiology lab. We have robotics who are doing it very efficiently. So I think in the near future, we will be in a position to see a lot of AI, a lot of technology in the healthcare, be it hospitals, be it outside of hospitals in labs. And we need to accept it and harness the power of AI to actually, to the full extent, to use it. Otherwise, we'll reach a stage in healthcare where it will be difficult to accommodate each and every patient's need.
Okay, okay. So, so my next my next question is on the medical diagnosis, and like I could find like a lot of AI methodologies are being used in the medical diagnosis currently. So like in my past question, like we spoke about like how good and how relying we can rely on the AI mechanism. So what are the top technologies which is available currently in the medical diagnosis?
So when you talk about technology, there is a lot of algorithms which are being worked on by researchers. There are a lot of them are based on CNN. Um, Deep learning is preferred because then you can train the algorithm. It trains itself with each image that goes in. Um, there are limitations because we still are, because it's a regulated, when it comes to medical diagnostic devices, the market is regulated, and it has to be, because we need to make sure that everything is in place. The thing is that with the regulations, they're still developing. Like if I'm talking about the FDA guidelines for AI, they're still in the process of, they're still proposals, they're not implemented. Which means that the key, which I mentioned before, is that the algorithm learns with each data point. Um, at this, we are at a stage where we can't actually incorporate it in the device when it is out in the market. We probably can relaunch another version of it. So, for example, if I'm talking about X diagnostic device, we launched it in the market, we got a lot of real world data back, and we can't just improve it and market it again as as X. The regulations are not there yet; they are only proposals. But in the near future, I can see that the change is coming up, which means that when you are going to have a medical device which is AI powered, a lot of real world data learning will happen when it comes to the algorithm, which will improve the accuracy and the precision of the AI powered device.
Okay, okay. So my next point is on like just like other industries, there will be ethical dilemma with using the AI. And in case of medical diagnosis or clinical domain, I think it will be huge in
Yes,
terms of
yes.
whether we can give a full control or how much control we have to give to an AI to kind of give a decision based on the data which is being there. So what is the responsibility of AI, and how much it is kind of worked through with different stakeholders like physician, patient data, and patient privacy, and how well the hospitals are kind of kinding like making the trade-off between how much we need to use an AI and how much we need to rely on.
That's a really good point, Deepak, that you brought forward, and it's true that there are going to be ethical dilemmas associated with AI, and it's there with use of AI in any world, be it automobiles or, but in medicine, it's particularly critical because we are dealing with life and death of a patient. So, um, as I mentioned earlier, what I see AI to be is a support system for for the physician. We are clearly not at a stage where we can give full autonomy to the AI to function independent of a human. But if it comes, and that's completely my point of view, is that the responsibility for the patient still lies with the physician. Because we are clearly not at a stage where we can hold the AI responsible. There's definitely, when more and more AI powered products will come into the market, the question of product liability will definitely come into picture. Like if AI fails to diagnose, is it the responsibility of the physician or is it the responsibility of the manufacturer? And when the regulatory authorities sit to decide these issues, we have to address them. It's not something which can be ignored because it's critical. Like you mentioned, patient privacy, patient data. So regulations have to be in place to ensure that patient privacy is maintained, that patient data is not free for all. It's right now we take precautions to make sure that the patient data is always safe, and that needs to be even with AI. There is a lot. This is one aspect of it, which is the ethical issues. The other part of which I think might also be an issue is the bias that comes with AI, and we're noticing this a lot. There is a lot of discussion going on that because there is a bias in humans, that bias is being carried forward to the AI. So, this is very important in medicine because we have seen that a drug or a treatment might be beneficial in one group of people, while it might not be in another group of people. So we have to ensure, and this is a very important aspect, which I think even the FDA has talked about, is to make sure that the AI is not biased, that the data that is going in the AI to train it is diversified enough that it actually represents the real world scenario. And this is essentially what is happening with our clinical trials as well. I see that's your next point, and I'll discuss it at that point. Uh, but AI is not there to replace the physician. It's not going to be, in my opinion, a world where you will have to be like, you can either go to an AI to get treated or you can go to a physician. I don't think it's that. It's AI and the physician. The physician, the AI will free up the time. So I'll give you an example if that helps. We're talking about pathologists, or we're talking about a radiologist who spend most of their time looking at images, digital images of cells or digital images of your brain. And all day long, what they do is just look at the images and, okay, this is normal, this is not normal, this is normal, that is their whole day. They don't have much say in the clinical outcome, or they don't have much patient interaction. So what AI is going to do is AI is going to do the initial screening for the radiologist. And if anything abnormal is detected, the radiologist comes into picture, clinically correlates it to the patient's symptoms, has more time to actually talk to the physician, talk to the patient, talk to their a person who has referred them for the CT scan. So these are different factors which need to be considered when the regulatory agencies are defining the guidelines for the use of AI in healthcare. And in my opinion, the sooner you start, the better you are. We can't wait for AI to be fully developed and then we'll think of regulations. No. Think ahead, be prepared for what is coming next. I hope that answered your question.
Yep, yep, indeed, indeed. Yeah. So my next point is on the drug development and clinical trial. So, what are the main benefits of using AI in these two mechanisms?
That is a very, very good topic that you have brought forward. And the biggest benefit is time. Because if I don't know if you are aware of the Moore's law, which talks about the number of transistors and then how the number of transistors increase, but the cost goes down every 2 years or so. So in the biopharma, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have the opposite of the Moore's law. It's the Eroom's law. It's exactly spelled opposite of Moore's. So it's Moore, but in pharma we have Eroom. And how and why is it that? Is that since 1950s till today, the cost of creating a drug has doubled every 9 years. So if I'm looking at drug development right now, on an average, it takes 12 to 13 years and almost $2.3 billion United States dollars, to get one drug out from the initial exploration to preclinical to clinical trials and finally to the patient, which is long and expensive. And if we don't change the way we are doing drug development in clinical trials, the projection is that maybe by the next 20 years, the 2.3 billion is going to be 16 billion for one drug, which is essentially going to collapse the healthcare industry if things are not changed. So the biggest impact which AI can have on drug development and clinical trials is time and money. I'm talking from a patient's perspective now. Now, if the overall time right now we can reduce is just 1 year out of those 12 years, it might not look a big number. That, okay, it was 12 years earlier, now it's 11, it's not a big deal. But if you're looking at one patient, for example, somebody was diagnosed of cancer, that 1 year for them is life and death, because there is a chance that they can actually get the medicine because we reduced the time. But that was just to, just to give you an example. The goal is, the hope is that with the use of technology, with the use of AI, we will be able to significantly reduce the amount of time and money it takes to get the drugs from research to the patient. So there is a lot going on. Especially with clinical trials, there is a lot of use of AI already in progress. So the biopharmaceutical companies, they are able to access a lot of scientific and research data from sources other than the clinical trials, and they call it the real world data. So with machine learning algorithms, um, and analytics, which are again powered by AI, so the pharma companies are able to unlock these real world data sources to get the data, and these help them understand the disease better, identify the patient population better, and much faster, which means we have a patient recruitment which is diverse, which is more appropriate, which will yield the better results. And at the same time, the amount of data, so we're looking at data from thousands of people. When you're talking about a phase 3 clinical study, there are thousands of people enrolled in it. So you can imagine the amount of data that is coming in. So with the use of AI, with the use of analytics, the data collection, the data management, the data analysis will become much, much easier. So I think it's overall, it's going to impact not just how clinical trials are designed, it's going to affect also the way patients are enrolled, the way the clinical trials are conducted, are operated, how the data is collected. And like I mentioned before, diversification is very important in clinical trials because one drug might be effective in one group, might not be as effective in the other. And the silver lining of this pandemic has been that a lot of focus has gone towards decentralization of clinical trials, which means basically that the patient need not come to the trial site, which is usually a big hospital in a big city. So the number of visits the patient will make to that clinical trial site will be very few, just minimum. And everything else, which is the patient monitoring, selection, after receiving the treatment, they have to do follow up. That all can be done either digitally or at their local site. So the decentralization of the clinical trials, we need to essentially digitalize the clinical trials. So at that point, we have AI. For example, wearable sensors. If we are dealing with a drug that helps patients who have heart disease, you can have a wearable sensor which is connected to an app in your mobile phone, which means the patient is getting monitored, their ECG is getting monitored while they are doing their work or while they are at home. And in real time, the data through their mobile app is being sent to the physician for follow up, for monitoring, for everything that otherwise would have required a hospital visit. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have to harness the full power of AI. That is the only way we can solve the complex problems which exist in the healthcare system right now. I hope that that information gave you a good insight. And if you want me to like explain a little more, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, I got a good clarity on that particular part actually. That's true. Like I think like on the entire workflow, we can actually embed in a lot of spaces this AI in specific actually. So I believe like that can increase the amount of time as you mentioned, like which is the biggest factor
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
the other aspects as well. Yeah. And over to my last question for today. And beyond patient care, what are the sectors which we can actually bring up AI in this entire process? So I suppose like nowadays AI is along with the applications of AI is actually branding or a way of branding also, like in terms of getting investment funding in across all the businesses and everything. So beyond patient care, like where exactly are these technologies being plugged in at this point in healthcare system?
So in healthcare, essentially, it will always revolve around patient because that's the ultimate goal. But I see the use of AI a lot in administrative functions in healthcare. Say, for example, electronic data capture. There's a big role there. So I don't know how your experience has been, but have you ever been to a doctor and you're trying to explain to the doctor that what is happening to me? I'm not feeling well. So you're in the doctor's clinic. You're trying to explain your agony, your pain, and all you can see is the doctor busy typing something on their computer. It's very normal because they need to maintain the records. And there is no other way. But so initially they used to write it on a paper, and then somebody would either type it in a computer or they themselves would type it in a computer. So that entire process, we've over years and decades, we've tried to streamline it to make it easier for the physician to talk face to face with the patient, because that was the whole idea. The humanness of being a physician is gone. So how comfortable you would be having a conversation without looking at the face of the person? Not really. Not much. The report never comes into picture. So that is precisely the area which everyone, all physicians feel that it's work which needs to improve. So there's something called clinical decision support system, where um, there are a lot of there's been a lot of work which has happened in this area. Nothing has worked much, but I see now that with the text recognition, the AI, that can actually help the physicians a lot. Now, Siri, Alexa, and I don't know, Cortana, we have a lot who can understand. We have on our phones to create a system where we have a text recognition AI specifically for patients and doctors. So doctor can actually have a conversation. The patient can talk their heart out. Okay, this is what my issue is. This is the pain that I'm feeling. And the doctor won't worry about making notes or typing it in a computer. So that is one. So these are, I would say, more of administrative roles which the AI can help, but it's going to be a big help there. So that, like, we can even talk about that the AI, the text which is actually written by the AI can be sent to the patient to review. Is like after the visit, is this precisely what you meant? Yes, this is exactly what I meant. So errors don't come into the picture. So the electronic health records is one big aspect of administrative work, which takes up a lot of time for physicians, where AI can be used. The other thing that I see is helping the nurses. I don't see in even in near future, far future, where we'll ever be able to humanize the AI so much that they can replace our nurses. The nurses run our healthcare industry. Our healthcare, our hospitals are run by them. They're there for the patient, caring for them, monitoring for them, walking them through each and every step. So I don't see that we reach a point where we can actually add so many emotions to the AI that it will be able to replace a nurse. But we can create systems which can help them. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of administrative work which our nurses do, and they are burdened. Like, burdened, overburdened is an understatement for the amount of work our nurses do. So, a lot of work has been done where robots have come into picture who assist the nurses, and they've tried to make them have the emoticons, the emojis on their monitor where they're smiling. They can greet the patients, they can guide the patients. Okay, this is where you need to go, and they'll take them there. So all of this otherwise comes on the nursing staff. So these are a couple of areas where we can help. And I can only say that I have big hopes from AI, because I think that the best of AI in healthcare is yet to come. And I think all of us in the healthcare industry, the physicians, the payers, the researchers, we all need to embrace the AI, be aware of the ethical challenges, be aware of the challenges that come with the AI, create guidelines around it, but not fear it, use it. So I'm more of a solution instead of being pessimistic about what could go wrong with AI, or being optimistic about all the opportunities that are ahead of us. Let's have a solution oriented mindset, which means that this is the issue which might come up. This is the solution for it. This is another issue which might come up. This is the solution. But let's move ahead. Let's take AI much more ahead where it is right now. Otherwise, our healthcare system is bound to fail.
Okay, okay. So that covers all my questions for today. And thank you so much, Punitee, for joining today's session and giving us such a great depth understanding about all these points. So I'm really hoping, as like how you do on like how improving the healthcare systems with the power of AI, and like with all these new technologies, we will be able to kind of grasp. So like I was under the impression actually like AI is actually more on the patient care system, but as you mentioned, it can be harnessed in all the other administrative and other beyond patient care mechanisms using other technologies like NLP and other text processing techniques. So that's great to know. And once again, thanking you for all the efforts you are actually putting in this particular space, and wish you good luck for this.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you. And I always say the best ideas can come from the person who's not even in the field. So I encourage all the engineers, all the people who are not in healthcare to think about how the technology can, give it a thought. And next time you have an opportunity to talk to somebody who is in healthcare, shoot out an idea. You never know, you don't need to have a lot of experience to bring up brilliant ideas. So thank you so much for giving me this platform to talk about the role of AI in healthcare.
Thank you so much,
You're
Punitee.
welcome.